Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Kera Dangerous Talk. I have a very special guest that I've been wanting to talk to for a long time.
We made it happen though. Finally made it happen.
Yes, Resmaa Menakem. And brother, I saw you on the Breakfast Club and I was so impressed with you because
Mm,
I've never heard somebody break down trauma the way
mm,
that you broke down trauma. And
mm,
I made a promise to myself that day that I was
mm.
going to get you on this show.
Yeah.
And I think you can contest to the fact that I was coming after you hard, brother.
Oh, hey, listen. I love a hustler. I'm a hustler. There's no other way. The reason why I'm able to do what I'm doing right now is because I'm a hustler and I recognize hustler. So, hey, I wasn't mad. I wasn't mad at all.
I'm a hustler, baby.
Hey, man.
I just want you to know.
That's right. Real talk.
Yes. Look,
Hmm.
before we get into breaking down and unpacking all of this trauma and healing, I got to hit them with the intro first
Let's
because
get it.
that's how we do here. Let's go.
Mhm.
Ooh, you know what? Ooh, you know what? Ooh, you know what? Yes. Rasma, again, thank you so much for joining me here. And you know what? Your story is so awesome. And I think I want to start there first. But let me just say, you are a New York Times best-selling author.
Mhm.
And it's this book right here that is just so groundbreaking. My
Mm,
grandmother's hands,
mhm,
racialized trauma, and the pathway to mending our hearts and bodies.
mhm.
An excellent job. And coming up
Thank you,
for,
sis.
oh, you welcome. And just because I want to go ahead and tell people about it, and maybe you'll give us a little info about it later, but you have a new book,
Yeah.
and there are waiting lists already on Amazon and the Kindle, and because I seen them, you
Yep.
know. So
Yeah.
get on one of the lists. You
Yes, sir.
have a new book that's going to come out, The Quaking of America, and an embodied guide to navigating our nation's upheaval and racial reckoning.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
just some good information that you
Yeah.
give constantly. But
Yep.
I want to start at my grandmother's hands
Mm.
because the reason you wrote this book, and I think the story you're about to tell us, I think so many people can relate to,
Mm-hmm.
especially when talking with their elders.
Yep.
And I mean, I hope you're talking to your elders. If you didn't,
That's right.
and if you have them now, you don't. You need to get started.
That's exactly right. Exactly
Yes.
right.
So, brother, tell my audience about what you noticed as a young child about your grandmother's
Yeah,
hands.
yeah. So I want to start with something you just said, and that is if you ain't making connections with your elders, what you're doing is you're missing context. One of the things that our elders do, and our ancestors do, is that they when they write something or they leave something for us, they give us context, right? They give us not just that these things have happened, but here is what happened that preceded that. Here's what you didn't see, right? And
Mhm,
so for me, the wisdom of spend, I still have elders that I spend
mhm.
time with, right? And it ain't because I'm trying to be nice to them and stuff like that. It's because I need that knowledge. I need
Hello.
I, I need that context, right? Because my context is just kind of is just my own personal lived experience, right?
Mhm.
I need my elders' context to say, and here's how this moves through time, right?
Yes.
And so for my grandmother, the book My Grandmother's Hands came out of a particular personal lived experience that I was having, not just myself but also with my grandmother and my grandma. And you know how when you're younger, your grandparents say things to you or impart different things to you, or you watch what their bodies recoil from and what their bodies lean into, and you may not know why they're doing that, but you know it's important to pay attention to.
Yes.
And so my grandmother used to do this thing where she would lay on the couch and lay her legs across our laps. It wouldn't matter if it was me or my other two brothers.
Mhm.
And then her hand would be on her hip. And she always complained of arthritis. So I would rub her hands, and she'd be sitting there watching. And that was back in the day when black people had 2 TVs. that big ass Curtis Mathis on the on the floor, and then the TV. Even one of them either had sound or had picture, or the other one had picture and had sound. And so you had both TVs going. So we was doing that. And one time I was rubbing her hands, and was comparing her hands to my hands. And one of the things that I said, just as a kid, I said, Grandma, and my grandmother was a smaller woman, but she had these pads, sis, on the back of her hand, these big, thick fingers, and then these pads on the inside of her. So I'm sitting there and I'm rubbing her hands. I said, Grandma, and I'm joking, because my grandma was a very funny person. She used to fart all the time. She used to, she used to joke. I mean, that's who she was. So I was saying, Grandma, why your hands so fat like that? My grandmother she didn't even look at me. Without missing a beat, she go, oh boy, that's from picking cotton.
Yes.
And I was like, and she must have heard the gap. And so she turned and she goes, boy, you ever seen a cotton plant? I said, no, ma'am. She goes, a cotton plant got these birds. And, I started walking up and this is the cadence she's talking in. Right. So I don't know what that is, but I know I need to pay attention to it. Right.
Yes.
And so she says, I started walking up and down them roads when I was 4 years old, because your great grandfather was a sharecropper. So we had to walk up and down the roads, pick that cotton. And when you put your hands in, them things rip your hands and stuff like that, and they bleed. And until they get some calluses on them, that's what's going to happen. They hurt. Like that. That's what my grandmother is saying to me. I think my nervous system was 8 years old at the time, something like that. And she goes, and then she looked at me, and then she turned and started watching TV again. I did not remember that story until I started writing my grandmother's hands 40 years later.
Wow.
Because there was no place for me to put it. And then when I started going through my own stuff, coming up, been sexually violated, coming up, doing 2 years in Afghanistan, coming up, all of that different type of stuff. And when that stuff, and when I got to the point of coming back from Afghanistan and was suiciding and doing all of these pieces, that story came back, and it started me think, well, and that's the other thing. I didn't find out until after she passed that my grandmother never really had arthritis.
Wow.
But she would always complain, like, ooh, like I'd hear her in the kitchen cooking. She'd go, ooh, my hands, like that. And that's what started me on the journey of thinking about how this stuff lives in the body. So, yeah.
That's exactly why I wanted to start there, because from your book, we get more of an understanding that trauma is definitely passed down through DNA, and the way that it can resurface can show up as, individually, you may think it's just a person's personality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on a larger scale, it comes off as culture. And that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah.
So I want you to kind of just break down to us how trauma has been spreaded historically.
Yes.
Through DNA and through our experiences and our ancestors, and how we're living with that.
Yeah.
Today.
So one of the things I say is that trauma, time decontextualizes trauma, right? So if me and you are sitting here saying, oh, hey, we getting brand new with the Helix.
Well, it's all about the DNA, right?
Let's get it. Time. So if me and you are talking right now, right, and my door gets kicked open, and somebody comes up in here with a tool and puts it up against my head, and then the camera goes off, right? And then a couple hours later, you hear from me, you say, brother, what happened, right? And I said, this dude came up in here and he did this, that, and the other, and right? And you'd be like, brother, did you, like, who's helping you, right? That's what you do, right? But what if that same thing happened and you didn't see it, right? And now you see me walking down the street 10 years from now, and I'm doing weird stuff and I'm acting weird, or every time you say something, I go, well, what you talking about then? What you want to do? Like, like
Abrasive.
that's right. So what ends up happening is that over time, if you don't address the charge of that trauma, that can get stuck. And over time decontextualizes trauma. So trauma in a person decontextualized can look like personality. Trauma in a family can look like family traits. Trauma decontextualized over time in a people can look like culture, right? And so the way that it works, think about it like this, sis. Me and you come from a people who were raped legally for 250 years legally. Just think about that for a second. We come from a people who were legally raped for 200 years to create a product that were our children. So if you think about our ancestors and what they had to do in order to survive that, they had to put away parts of themselves that were too tender to be exposed in that environment. There's when you know that the average age of rape on plantations and when I say rape culture and I say rape, I'm talking about men and women. That sis, you killing the game. The average.
Look, I'm trying to put some images to what you're talking about.
I love it. The average age of rape on plantations was 9 years old. So what happened to our ancestors when they heard rape happening or knew that their children were going to be raped legally by anybody on that plantation, and there was nothing literally that they could do to stop it from? What had to happen in their bodies in terms of cortisol, norepinephrine, adrenaline, that are only supposed to be in the bloodstream for just certain amount of time, right? And then you piss it out. That's what's supposed to be. But what happens when the trauma is consistent and persistent and pervasive, right? So when our people get organized around that trauma, and parts of us we have to pull back and parts of us we have to dissociate from, it is not because something is defective in us. It's because something happened to us, not just individually, but communally. Many times we talk about self-care, but what we have to begin to really talk about, especially when we're talking about historical, intergenerational, persistent, institutional, and personal trauma, is we also have to start talking about communal care, because what happened to our people didn't just happen to our people individually, it happened to our people communally also. So developing an individual response to a communal horror is inadequate. So what we're dealing with right now in our people is that we've ingested all of this plantation ethic, all of these ideas about who we are, and then we play it out on each other. And so for me, the trauma, my work is really about how do we begin to slow down and pause, so all of that energy that has been thwarted through enslavement, thwarted through colonialism, thwarted through land theft, thwarted through genocide, right? All of those pieces, we have to work with it in the embodied sense so we can loosen the grips of it, so what is already there that wants to emerge can emerge. That's the work. That's what my work is really about.
Yes. Oh, you said a mouthful right there. Now I'm seeing a lot of families who deal with a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Especially with Black families. You'll see so many times have issues with anger and temper. And I mean, we could talk about drug abuse, and I think that's across the board for many races.
Yeah.
But the biggest impact, the biggest thing I think we hear when we talk about trauma is slavery. But if we have to heal each other as a community, but it's so many of us who don't want to face the fact that we have trauma individually. Now, what is it about some people where they just cannot unwrap the fact that they have been traumatized?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that happens is that when I'm talking about trauma, I'm talking about a thwarting energy, something that thwarts emergence, right? And so when I'm working with Black bodies, I'm never just dealing with the personal lived experiences. So there's a thing that I call HIP, HIPP, right? Whenever you're dealing with a body that has been brutalized, terrorized, or marginalized, what you're dealing with is HIP energy all at the same time. So you are dealing with the historical. You are dealing with the intergenerational. You are dealing with the persistent institutional, and you are dealing with their own personal lived experiences. Now, a lived experience might. So, have you, sis? Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been dealing with somebody?
Yes.
And have you ever been dealing with somebody and you start talking to them about something that you feel is not necessarily a huge deal? It's not a big deal, but you know you need to talk to them about it. And then when you talk to them about it, they lose their shit. Like they bloat, they go bonkers.
My
Like they
name is
go.
Kera Dangerous, so yes. Too many times, more than I would like.
So when I see that as a trauma therapist, an embodied trauma therapist, one of the things that I go, if there is more energy present than there should be, you have to ask, where did the other energy come from? So I immediately, when that happens, I go, what's the historical pieces with this? What might be informing that level of energetic reaction? What right? And then I begin to, and so when I'm working with bodies, especially Black bodies, I really want to slow things down so we can begin to develop some discernment between, oh, that's that piece that's coupled with that. That's that piece that's coupled with the historical. I never assume it's just personal. Because a lot of times we've gotten organized around these reflexive reactions being protective, and usually it's not protective in just my own personal body. I've learned it from the other nervous systems of the caregivers of the people that have loved me, right? So I pick it up in them by not by their instruction, by what my mama recoiled from and leaned into, right? That in terms of her body, did she recoil from things and lean into it? Even if I didn't know what that recoil meant, I knew it was something that I needed to pay attention to, right? And so that's how we learn it. A large part of those reactions has a tremendous amount of grief to it. A tremendous amount of grief, and many of us have not navigated the historical grief of our people. We have not navigated the intergenerational grief that has happened in my lineage, in my line. We have not navigated the persistence. Just one reason why I say Black and Indigenous bodies don't experience post-traumatic stress disorder. We experience pervasive and persistent traumatic stress disorder. Post would imply that it has stopped, and it has not.
Whew. Look, whew. In your book, you give several warnings, and you
Yes, I
say,
do.
look, if you can't deal with this, or if you're not looking at it in a certain light, you may not want to go further.
That's exactly right.
Because you deal with trauma in the body.
Is right.
And how your body responds and react to it.
Yeah.
Now, we're doing a lot of skirting around one of the main reasons we have a lot of trauma, but we're going to get right into it.
Yeah.
Because you speak directly to white people in your book, and you ask, well, they ask you many times, what can they do? And you break down, what does it mean when white folks ask this and what they really mean? What can I do that won't cost me or hurt me or challenge me?
That's right.
If that describes you, now you have to choose, either stop reading or commit to growing up.
That's it. That's it.
So I think this is a good time for you to explain to us why you use the term white bodies, because I think a lot of us are used to the word white supremacy.
That's right.
So let's go ahead and
Let's get it. So my organizing, we have different things that kind of more us, like foundational pieces that, like, when I'm navigating the world, I may not know a lot of shit, but I know this.
Right. That's what I say many times.
That's right. So one of the things that when I'm writing, my organizing rubric or my organizing moorings or foundation is this. that the white body has deemed and deems itself the supreme standard by which all bodies, humanity shall be measured structurally and philosophically. If you don't understand that, everything will confuse you about this world. Everything will confuse you about white body supremacy. So when I'm moving and I'm talking, that is my underlying rubric, is that the white body has deemed itself the standard of humanness. The race question in this culture globally, and the race question specifically in America, is a species question first. It has always been a species question. When Europeans decided that they were going to create this idea of race, it came out of the discussion that they were having around race being a category of species.
Wow.
Right? So it came out of the term, they were talking about a race of fauna, a race of dog, a race of cat, a race of bird. That's how they were thinking about it. So by the time in the 15th century, when they started to move out and spread out, right, they had already been talking about race in a species term. So when they started coming across indigenous bodies, when they started coming across African bodies that didn't look like theirs, their thought was that's a different species. Not just based on pigment, and not just that they created a pigmentocracy, based on melanin, or having more melanin or less melanin. What they said was, is Kera and Resmaa, are they human? And the answer to that question persistently throughout the development of America, the things that I'm talking about existed before America became America. These pieces, the answer to that question is no, they're not human. And what we forget a lot of times is we think that the race question is only about the pigmentocracy that they created, but it really is about can pigmentation be used as a shorthand for who is human and who is not? So let me say just one quick piece about it. When you watch what happened in the Ukraine, and you see soldiers standing up there determining who is going to get on the trains and who's not going to get on the train, what you're watching is people using pigmentation as shorthand for who is human. They didn't know if those African brothers and sisters were Ukrainian. They didn't give a fuck. What they knew was is that in them, and this is why white bodies have to begin to do this work with each other. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about what's going on with me. White bodies have to begin to create culture around ushering in a living, embodied, anti-racist culture. Not allyship, not any of that other bullshit. How are you going to create a living, embodied, anti-racist culture so you don't pass this virus down to your children's children? You telling me you're an ally and declaring yourself to be an ally. How would I know that if you hadn't have told me?
That's a great question.
Right.
That's a very great question. While we're here, I want to remind everybody that's tuning in to make sure you like this video, comment in the live chat, and keep everything interesting and respectful. So we are talking about some of the topics in your book, your New York Times best-selling book, My Grandmother's Hands. Look, brother, you work hard for it.
I work hard, sis. I appreciate you. I appreciate you.
Now, I want to bring some attention to your chapter 4, where you talked about European trauma and the invention of whiteness, which we kind of covered. But a quote I heard you give in an interview was by Janice Barbie.
Yep.
What white bodies did to black bodies, they did to white bodies first.
Yeah.
That is so powerful.
Whew. So let me tell you. So there is a Janice Barbie is a white woman here, and she has done a lot of work, and she's friends with one of my elders, black woman who's an elder here. And so when I finished the first transcript or the first pass at my grandmother's hands, my elder mother Toon told me, she said, you should have a couple people that you trust read the book first and just see what things might show up and might come forth. And so she said, so I said, well, who do you think? She said, well, I think you should have Janice read it. I think you should have such and such, a bunch of people read it. So I did. And when I got done, Janice called me. She goes, I need a couple weeks just to kind of let this.
I'm telling you.
she said, Resmaa, this is so powerful, and I need a little time to let this move, let this kind of, right. And so I let her, and then finally she called. She goes, the book is beautiful, is needed, and there's one piece that I want you just to kind of, and you talked a little bit about it, but I think it needs to be highlighted just a little bit more. And I said, what is that? And this is a white woman that I trust. I mean, she's been around me for 30 years and stuff like this, right? I done seen her work some of her shit. And so I was able to, and I can't do that with all white folks, but with her,
I like, you better look, yeah. Paul Mooney, I feel somewhere saying, you better hide her somewhere. You better put her in the closet somewhere and lock her up. Because she's a unicorn, baby.
That's right. Unicorn. So what happened was, she said, as I was reading your book, one of the things that kept happening is that I kept getting these images of my ancestors. And she said, remember that most white people that you know are descended from white people that were fleeing something.
Somebody just brought that to my attention just recently.
Yeah. When she said that, I was like, oh, I stopped for a minute. And she said, most of us are here because we were fleeing other white bodies. We were fleeing the genocide from other white bodies. We were fleeing the Crusades. We were fleeing the conquistadors. We were fleeing the Middle Ages. We were fleeing the hangings and the land theft by rich elite white bodies. So we know that brutality. And by the time we got here, and these rich aristocrats here offered us the chance to be white, something other than just poor, we leapt at it with both hands. And she said, but the seeds of that was the 1,000 years of brutality that we had experienced from elite white bodies first. And so that's why, one of the reasons why we won't relinquish whiteness, because we see whiteness as tied to our survival. And when they gave us black bodies and indigenous bodies to begin to play that shit out on, we didn't question it. When she said that to me, I was like, woo! I was like, yeah, that's got to be, I have to bring that out. And because white bodies have gotten to a place to where, remember what I said, trauma decontextualized over time can look like culture.
Yes.
Right.
Well, you know what? I want to say something to you right now.
Please.
Because these are some quotes that I love that I heard you say. What happens with white folks is, here's the quote, you can't participate in brutalizing people without disrupting part of your humanity. Brother, when you said that, it went through me. And also a quote by James Baldwin. Once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. And brother, how many people don't want to deal with pain? They'll rather deal with anger. Because to me, when you don't deal with pain, it comes out in anger.
That's exactly right.
I'm not a therapist, but
but you got good sense. But you got good sense.
I've been around enough fools to know when you don't deal with pain, baby, it's gonna, even with myself, it's gonna come out with anger. And like the old folks say, if it don't come out in the wash, it'll come out in the rinse or whatever. However it go.
That's it.
That's it, brother.
But that's the grief. See, that's the grief that I'm talking about, sis. It's much easier. It's much see the black body is where America has always been trained to do its dirt. Pause on that for a second. We've also ingested some of that ethics. So we even look at black bodies as where we do our dirt. Right?
Why is it that the conversation is always about black people dealing with trauma, but white people have a lot of trauma.
Yeah, because
Whenever we shoot each other, we just
because
shoot each other.
this is what I say. Remember what I said about the rubric? But the
Mm-hmm.
white body has deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies, humanity, because they're the fucking standard. When they deem themselves the standard, then any type of inquiry as to what the fuck are y'all doing? Y'all have created this whole pigmentocracy, this whole structure, right? That you are being brutalized by too, but you can't see that, right?
Can't see it.
So one of the things that I talk when I'm doing work with white bodies, one of the things that I talk to them is about there's a medical term that's called iatrogenesis. Iatrogenesis, right? And iatrogenesis is a phenomenon in the medical field. It's where doctors prescribe something to a patient, right? Mm-hmm. And the patient doesn't get better through that prescription, through that prescribing. The patient actually gets sicker. And the doctor keeps doing it because their virtue and their limitations are lined up with each other. So no matter which way their teeth they try and twist their head, their virtue is lined up with the limitation of what it is they're prescribing. So no matter which way they twist their head, they can't see the limitation. The only thing that can happen, the only thing that has to happen, and this involves being able to contend with the uncomfortableness of it. Mm-hmm. The way that you actually heal with doctors is that you and people is that you help them get things offline. Mm-hmm. So things can now begin to quake and the uncomfortableness can now show up. Now you can begin to work with it with the virtue. The reason why you can't see it is because you're coming at it through your virtuous side and you're not able to see the limitations. So white folks have been so invested in whiteness. White bodies have been so invested in them being the mm-hmm. Human and everybody else being a deviant from the humanists, right? Mm-hmm. That when you bring it to them, white bodies have no collective efficacy or agility when it comes to race. None. Collectively, they have no collective and bodies of culture and black bodies in particular have had to understand race from a vibratory perspective, mm-hmm. have had to understand race from a cognition and image perspective, have had mm-hmm. to understand race from a meaning making perspective, from a behavior and urge perspective, from mm-hmm. an emotional and affective perspective, from a sensate perspective, and from an imaginative perspective. Those things are literal intelligence that white bodies have not had to contend with because they haven't had to. Do bad things happen to white folks? Absolutely, but mm-hmm. not this.
not this, brother. not this one.
And this particular thing, shapes the rest.
Look. I had to take a breather. I got so much stuff I want to get in with you, brother. This is not even fair. So I'm gonna just pop up an image, and I'm not even trying to do things in order. I'm just trying to give folks insight. Yeah. And I want you to tell us what this means. Mm-hmm. That brain over there to the left. Ooh, because you brought it up in your book, The Lizard Brain.
Yep. So here's the deal. This thing is called the three-parted brain or the triune brain, right? Mm-hmm. The triune brain is that the lizard part of the brain or the part of the brainstem is the part of the brain that is responsible for responding to the environment, right? Is mm-hmm. something potentially dangerous, right? And there are two pieces, and this is the oldest part of the brain. It's the part of the brain that's been the most online. And one of the things I always say to people is that, remember, y'all, that when creation decided it was going to create the first human being on this planet, it decided that was going to be a black woman first.
Say that one more time.
When creation decided that there was going to be a human representation on this planet, it decided that was going to be a black woman in Africa first. Now, that is not my theory. That is not my philosophy. That is rooted in science. right? That
Mm-hmm.
all human beings come from a black woman. The very mitochondrion in your body and in my body right now says comes from an African woman. There is
Now,
not.
every
Go ahead.
scholar I had on this show has said that,
Yeah.
which see, it's so much we could talk about. I can't
Go
even
ahead.
get into
Let's
I
get
can't
it.
even get into interracial dating with you because I see a push to get black women on white men, and
Yeah.
so it seems like an agenda. I
Yeah.
even had uh, Jane on here, Jane Elliott, and
Yep.
saying that white people need to mate with black people because
Fuck
they're.
that. I'm not saying that. That ain't what I'm
I know
saying.
you're not saying it, and I'm not
Okay.
hoping for it. I'm
Yeah.
just saying because they know
And,
that their time is running out.
well, and here, let me say this. And I don't, and let me say this piece. I want to be very, very clear here. I got white folks and white people in my life that I love, that I've grown up with, and all that different type of stuff, right?
Mhm.
That ain't what the fuck I'm talking about right now. You understand what I'm saying? That's not what I'm talking
Right.
about.
Be
I'm not
clear,
talking.
brother.
I'm not talking about who you screwing. I'm not talking about who you done lay with. I'm not talking about who you like. I'm not talking about the fact you done adopted a kid from Kenya. I'm not talking about your best friend. I ain't talking about none of that shit. That ain't got nothing to do with me, right?
Mhm.
What I'm talking about is how this shit is set up.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the structural pieces and how we need to get at those structural pieces. And if all you can say is that we need to start screwing each other, well, we were raped and screwed for 250 years legally. That didn't change shit. That don't change
Hello.
the structure. That's not a structural response to the structural stuff that's affecting me and my people, that has affected me and my people from eons.
Well, I think she
School.
was trying to say that they're becoming, I don't know if the word should be extinct, but
Listen, I don't listen, Kera. I don't care.
okay.
That is not. She can. All people can have those types of opinions and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
I'm not gonna fight with you. I'm not gonna argue with you. That ain't what I'm talking about, though. That ain't what I'm talking about. I'm saying that. When there is, I'm reading research now, so I'm already started. So Quaking of America is coming out, but I'm already starting on what might be the next one. And you know what? There is scientific study right now. Right
Mhm.
now, there's scientific studies. People, and you can read. You can actually pull this up, sis. There's scientific studies right now where people are pumping money in, and they're asking the question: when did Europeans start to develop pale skin? Now, just pause on that for a second.
Okay.
Now, think about what I'm saying. Just think about what I'm. When did Europeans start to develop pale skin? Now, when you hear me say that, what I want you to lean into is I'm starting with Europeans didn't always have pale skin,
Mhm.
right? That the idea of European and pale skin is less than 8,000 years old. Now, you don't have to take my word. All you
Mhm.
got to do is Google. Scientists are now doing this stuff, right? They're thinking that the idea of pale skin didn't actually start to happen until like 8,000 years ago. We've been on this earth as human beings for 200,000 years. At the human being, the modern human being that we know is a 200,000-year-old thing. The black woman and the mitochondrion tied to black and African people is a 200,000-year-old thing. The pale body, the pale skin is less than 8,000 years old. Now, when
Well,
I
I guess
say
this is what. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
that, I
Mhm.
don't want people to automatically move into the kind of pejorative race thing that we normally go to. I'm
Mhm.
only saying that in the context of the rubric that we're now living in, that says that the white body is the standard of humanness. So everything I'm talking about is within that context, right? I'm not saying I'm not placing anything else on that. And so the reason why I'm saying this whole piece, is that those pieces around humanity and white bodies being part of the human family,
Mhm.
white body supremacy disrupted that connection.
Mm-hmm.
White body supremacy and the idea, and then creating a whole structure, a whole scientific structure, a whole educational structure, a whole economic structure based on me and you not being human. They got uh, the white superpowers of the time: France, England, Portugal, Spain, and the Netherlands. Those five superpowers got fat and filthy rich off of land theft, enslavement, genocide, imperialism, and colonialism, right? And they shared knowledge about who we were as Black people and within that racial context. So what they ended up doing was creating this global understanding of who African people were and who Black people were and who indigenous people were in order to stay on top with regard to the economic strucures. And they didn't do it. And let me say this last piece. I know I'm rambling, but I just got to say this.
No, it's good.
They didn't. What we have to do as I believe as Black people specifically in bodies of culture generally is that we have to stop thinking that the reason why they did this shit was because of race or was because of hate. Hate is a byproduct. They did this because of self-interest. It was in poor white folks' self-interest to attach themselves to elite white bodies. It was elite white bodies' self-interest to attach themselves to land theft and crusades and genocide and murdering people and taking their land and all. It was in their self-interest. So we have to, and Brother Kendi X says this, right, in his book. It's about, so you have to understand that when they're doing this is about their self-interest first, not about the hate. The hate is a byproduct of the self-interest.
Look, guys, we don't have much time left, but we're going to be able to hit a couple more things for all the people that's joining us. Thank you so much. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And, you know, it's so much I want to say, but I'm going to try to pack this in, Resmaa, because in your book, you talk so much about the link between adverse childhood effects and diseases and illnesses like heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, chronic lung disease, depression, sexual transmitted diseases, poor academic and work performance, drug use, pregnancy, all these things, suicide from trauma. But this is something I definitely is so many things I want to talk about concerning this, but I want to start here because somebody needs to hear this and know this. You said that a man with unhealed trauma in his body may produce sperm with altered DNA. Let me go to my little DNA video.
I love
a man with unhealed trauma in his body may produce sperm with altered DNA expressions. In turn, it may inhibit the healthy cells in his children.
That's right.
It may alter those cells.
That's exactly right.
To me, that's information that people need to know because a lot of times we think that we can have children and just continue to do whatever we want, and the individuals not working on themselves and not even thinking about the fact that they're passing down this trauma to their children. And as you stated in your book, the nervous system of young adults and children is very sensitive.
Yes.
And they absorb everything through their body. And they can sense if grandma's not right, if daddy's not right, if auntie's not right.
Even if they can't articulate it. Yes. They know something is happening. Right. And so the reason why I say this piece is that there is when you remember what I'm talking about. So everything that I'm talking about is happening all at the same time, right? So we say, well, that happened 250 years ago. Well, tell my fucking nervous system that it happened 250 years ago.
Right.
When I'm having these reactions that seem bigger than now, right? My wife tells me to hey baby, can you take out the garbage? And I go, why don't you have him take out the goddamn garbage?
It sounds funny, but this happens.
That's what. So, and we never inquire into why there's so much energy in that particular situation. And this is the piece that I'm saying is that living in a structure that's predicated on the white body being the standard structurally and philosophically. There's these pieces that pop up in us that literally weather the nervous system. Now let's just pause just for 1 second. Any body that's born in a society, any black, brown, or indigenous body that's born into a society by which that society is hierarchically structured around the white body being the standard. The moment that you're born into that society, you are being weathered and withered by that structure. You are being weathered because your mama was being weathered by it. And as your nervous system started to develop in her womb, your nervous system is being developed by that soup, by that stress, by those stress hormones, by all of that. And your mama don't even know that it's something that's happening in her because it's decontextualized, because her mama didn't know it, because we did things in order to survive it. And her daddy didn't know it, and her dad. So by the time it gets to me and you, sis, we know it as notions and sensations and like, oh, that's weird. Oh, I'm not quite sure, right? Because we haven't created a culture that can articulate and say, no, you're not defective. Something has happened and continues to happen to your people. Let's start with that first. Let's slow that down first, right? That's the piece. And so it's the reason why. So a couple years ago, I got asked to do a keynote speech to the National Association of Gynecologists, right?
Yes, that's what I wanted you to bring up. So many black women with problems with fertility.
That's it.
I even have my own problems trying to figure out why I'm burning up, sweating at night. Nobody can give me an answer. I've been going through this through years.
That's
it. Go ahead and go into it, brother. I'm glad you're hitting this up.
So vaginal fibroids in black women is it's a rough piece, right? And it's something that keeps showing up. Like in my office when I was doing my private practice, there were so many. So my private practice, I was getting a lot of black women that were coming in with fibroids, right? With vaginal fibroids. And then I was getting a lot of Korean women that were adopted by white families, right? So you see what I mean? So that so one of the things that happened is that I got to the place early to just watch other people do speeches, right? And because it was a whole day thing, right? So I'm watching and I'm listening and I'm like, okay, people are talking about, low birth weight of black babies. They were talking about how black babies were dying in gestation, and they were talking about black women dying giving birth, and the numbers were just crazy, right? So I'm listening, they're coming up with all of these statistics and all of this different type of stuff. I'm listening. Then finally, man, when I got my chance, I got up there and I said, look, I've been here all day and I've been listening to y'all and, some good information, all that stuff. I said, but let me ask y'all this. Why is it that we're sitting here talking about, black women dying during childbirth, and we're not talking about the 250 years of rape on the black body?
What? I said, you better say that one more time.
Yeah. I said, what happens to what do you think might happen? How come we're not pushing our ideas with regard to black women dying in childbirth? How come we're not talking about the impact of weathering of enslavement and brutality and genocide and hangings and aggressions and terror on black towns? How come we're not talking about if that might affect the production of vaginal fibroids? How come we're not talking about that? How come we're not talking about that level of cortisol in the nervous system might be why the fetus in the black body might might not be viable enough because it's been surrounded by adrenaline and norepinephrine and crowding out oxytocin and feel good chemicals. How come we're not talking about it in that way? Why do we want to talk about it as fucking lifestyle choices? Why is that the only thing? Like something, I must be doing something wrong, not the fact that I'm constantly being weathered and withered by structure, right? That I have to navigate, whether I'm in the charge of, whether I'm the CEO or in the charge of a Fortune 500 company, and I'm a black CEO, I'm still being weathered at that level. Or I'm in the hood and I'm having to navigate not only my trauma, but everybody in my environment's trauma. Right? Like, why aren't we talking about the weathering effects of this structure on our bodies when we're talking about women and specifically black women? There was crickets.
Did you get a crickets? It was crickets.
Crickets. Because there is no culture that collectively white bodies have with regard to race. They don't have a collective understanding. It is relatively new. So let me say this to you, sis. It is relatively new that me and you could be talking the way that we're talking. And when I go upstairs, I don't have a whole lot of fear that there's a lynch party waiting for me. That's new in our fucking experience. Right. In our experience, that is the way that me and you are talking right now. I would have to be like, where the shotgun, where my AR, where my, right? I would have to be thinking about how I'm going to take care of my babies and make sure that, right? Because the white body is so used to having full and unfettered access to every orifice, every idea, every part of our bodies. That's why when you say no to them, they lose their shit. That's why something as simple as Colin Kaepernick kneeling quietly on a football field, something as simple as that, they can't fucking collectively tolerate that. They can't.
And let's say too, we may not be getting lynched, but they'll find a way to lynch you in a different way.
No, absolutely, absolutely. That's the pervasive and persistent pieces that's still going. But what I'm trying to say is that the white body, the white collective body, does not. They have not. The white collective body can't conceive of a free black body. Can't conceive
now that's
of a
what
free
I'm
indigenous
about.
body. They can't conceive it. We're trying to talk to them about shit like, let's can we all just get along? Can we talk? And you're talking Mandarin and they speak German. It's like because they haven't created they have to create a living, embodied, anti-racist culture, not declarations.
To get into ending our time together, well, first I just want to say a quote that I heard you also say, is that we're not free, we're just loose.
And I heard that from somebody else. I can't remember who said that.
And I have it here, but I don't want to lose my I have who said it, but I don't want to lose my spot. Okay. But I want to end it here for us because we have to go all the way around and then come back to healing. Because for 400 years, we made it through by the flow of resilience. That's and right. You call it a flow. It's a flow to it. And we've been able to do that through multiple bodies. Yeah. And this reminds me of seeing the slaves and hearing stories about them singing in the fields
and humming,
and the slave masters thinking that they were happy, but they weren't happy. They were trying to bide their time. They were trying to keep something joyful in their spirit. Yeah. But this is the way Black people, Native people have been able to make it. It's through resilience.
That's right. Through resilience and resistance. It has to be at the same time, right? Our resilience, the way that I found just a little bit of space to make it through my suicide when I came back was remembering when my grandmother used to have my ear to her chest and she'd be rocking and she'd hum. right?
Mm-hmm.
Those pieces help to regulate my vagal nerve and help me find just a little nibble of safety when my dad was going in and out of prison and violent and all of that different type of stuff. Like though, and to have her rock and hum, that's how our people made it. Is that I
Mm-hmm.
can't stop you from being raped, but maybe you can hear just a little bit of that we love you and that we hear. Maybe you can hear that, and maybe that can help us move or help you move to the next day. That's how. And so what we have to do is we have to go and we have to reclaim these pieces communally and stop acting like those things are throwaways, right? The humming, the rocking, the cadence, the laughter, the joy, the giggling, like just with me and you, just me and you haven't met each other, but laughing and joking and spending time with each other and being moored in some of the same realities, that helps me make it to the next day.
Well, real recognize real as well. And when you on the same accord and fighting for some of the same things, I think you just naturally will have a good vibe with a person. Before you leave, we got 5 minutes here. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot go without explaining this because I like to do things in order, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to hit on clean and dirty.
Ooh,
Clean and dirty pain.
that's a beast concept, ain't it?
Yes, because we have not really touched it, but we have to touch it to let people know how
Yeah.
to get their healing.
Yeah. So let me say it as let me ask you as a question to illustrate it. Okay.
Mhm.
Have you ever been with somebody, sis? Have you ever been with somebody and you love their dirty draws, but there's a part of you that says, I shouldn't be with this motherfucker. This
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes, yes,
okay.
yes, 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 yes.
Right? But you stay anyway.
Yes.
That's the dirty pain, right? That's the dirty. The clean is when you finally get to a place and you say, I'm done.
Mm.
And you crying in the house and you walking around and you try one day at a time, but that's the pain of capacity building and going through it as opposed to going around it. That's clean and dirty, right? As adults, we don't get a choice between pain and no pain. We
Mhm.
usually get a choice between clean and dirty, and then over time we may have less pain. May have more capacity, but that's not what happens on the front end. That's
Look, you know what, Resma? I feel like I know you. I'm gonna tell you, this ain't right, brother. You got to come on here and give me like 2 hours. This was like a 5-piece nugget. I'm still hungry, brother. Now this ain't right.
We're gonna do it again, sis. I promise you.
Look, don't tell me that because I'll be up on you. You already know, brother. I'm either gonna get you or you're gonna be highly annoyed. But I'm gonna stay on
so
you.
so let me say this. So my new book, The Quaking of America, which I started to write in order to make sure that we understood that when these fools decided that they was going to attack the Capitol, that was a seminal moment in our time. And we need to understand that from our perspective, what that seminal moment was. So that's what The Quaking of America is about. And so I'm getting ready. So that gets released on April 12th. And it's going to be it's already a whirlwind in terms of just the feedback that I've gotten from it. And sis, before we get off, make sure you send me a mailing address so I can send you a copy. Okay.
Absolutely. Stay on the
Uh,
line after I end the
okay.
broadcast.
Yeah. So and I'm going to be on a Breakfast Club again on April 12th. So we're going to
Nice.
be and I'm somebody, I can't say who it was, but somebody bought a big ad on the NASDAQ Jumbotron in Times
Mhm.
Square for the book and everything. And so
Awesome.
this book was really about having a better understanding of what we actually saw when them fools went up in there and shit on the floors and peed on the flags and beat the hell out of 141 police officers at the same time they yelling Blue Lives Matter. That it was my take on how you need to look at that and understand that these folks, with a lot of them with AR-15s, and a lot of them believe in this bullshit that they ain't
Mhm.
playing. And if you see that and that didn't spur you to start figuring out what you were going to do to protect yourself in an embodied sense and protect yourself in a security sense, then you missed what that particular moment was trying to teach you and tell you. So so that's what the quaking is about. I suggest that people pick up both of them, but get my grandmother's hands first, because that lays kind of like a bedrock for you to be able to rock with quaking.
Well, I'm gonna hope that you can come back and talk about your next book, but sound like you may have 2 or 3 more coming behind that. So
Yeah, yeah.
hopefully I can catch you on something. This has been so wonderful. And again, I thank you so much. I just want to make sure you gave everybody everything to know
Yeah.
how to reach out to you, your
Resmaa,
website, throw it out.
hook up with me on Instagram, Resmaa Menakem, and then hook up with me if you want to pre-order the book. Go to Resmaa RESMAA.com, and then you'll see where you can pre-order it. And pre-orders help the hell out of me. So if you pre-order, that's very helpful, and I just appreciate you, Kara, for giving me the time, sis. I really do.
Absolutely. And you guys can also listen on Spotify when you doing your walking. I was jogging and I was listening, or whatever you want to do. Listen, read. Hey, just make sure you hear what he's saying and take it in. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining us live. Make sure to like, subscribe, and sign up for notifications, and leave some great comments, guys. We'll see you next time. Thank you again, Resmaa.
Thank you, sis. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.